Coming up tonight, we look at the Child Death Review pilot project, and we speak to Professor Matthews, who is the head of the Children's Institute from the University of Cape Town. Good evening and a warm welcome to When Duty Calls, together moving South Africa forward, back to basics, towards a safer tomorrow. According to reports, millions of children around the world are in danger of abuse, neglect, exploitation and violence, and child abuse death is underreported, making it possible for perpetrators to get away with their crimes. In light of this, Professor Matthews, head of the Children's Institute from the University of Cape Town, formed a Child Death Review project. The Child Death Review project was established in response to the alarmingly high number of deaths of children due to violence as well as preventable causes. The purpose of this project was to review every death of a child that is reported and to stop preventable deaths by better understanding how and why children are dying. These type of partnerships play an important role in crime prevention. Community structures such as Business Against Crime and the Child Death Review project support the police in terms of fulfilling their mandate. We spoke to Professor Matthews, who runs this pilot project.
My name's Professor Shanaz Matthews. I head up the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town, and I've been involved in a Child Death Review project for the past 3 years at Phoenix Mortuary. It's an idea that were developed out of work that I've been doing on child homicides in South Africa over the past probably more than 5 years now. The Child Death Review Committee was established at Phoenix 3 years back, so 2014 we started a pilot both at Phoenix Mortuary and Salt River Mortuary. But we developed the pilot project out of I was involved and led a study on child murders in South Africa, and it looked at murders across the country in 1999. Firstly, that was the first study we did. We firstly looked at female murders in South Africa and then did a repeat of the work in 2009. When we did the repeat, I felt it was important for us to look at not just female murders, but also to start looking at child murders, because our first study showed us that there is a problem with children being killed, but we didn't know exactly how big it was. I was particularly interested looking at child murders because my area of interest is children being killed in the context of fatal child abuse. Because South Africa had no idea how many children are in fact murdered in the context of abuse. We did the work in 2009, and it showed us that South Africa has a child murder rate more than double the global murder rate. So our rate is 5.5 per 100,000, so that's the way you can compare between countries. The global rate is 2.4 per 100,000, so ours is more than double. When we also not only looked at mortuaries, so we could see numbers of children being killed, but we also linked the mortuary data with your police data in order for us to understand more about how and why children were being murdered. When we started looking at police data, we saw that yes, large numbers of children are actually killed in the context of fatal child abuse. Just under half of South Africa's children who are murdered are actually murdered in the context of abuse. And that's really big, because what you're looking at is more than one child a day in the country.
Professor Matthews stated that they found that investigating child cases was particularly difficult because people investigating these cases empathized with the family and didn't expect parents to kill their own children.
When you see a child's body in front of you, you've got to say to yourself, this should not have happened. And you should be asking questions around what happened to this child right from the beginning.
When the project started, it was piloted from 2 provinces, the Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. In the province of KwaZulu-Natal, the project focused on the northern side of Durban in areas like KwaMashu, Inanda, Phoenix, Verulam, as well as Pietermaritzburg and surrounding areas.
The pilot was largely for logistical reasons. So firstly, I'm based at the University of Cape Town, and Salt River Mortuary is linked to the University of Cape Town, and it's one of the largest mortuaries in the country. So we wanted to see whether a large mortuary like Salt River that sees nearly 4,000 bodies a year could cope by doing child death reviews. We wanted to have a site that's very different, and therefore we looked at a province that's very different in terms of what the Western Cape is, and KZN has the largest child population in South Africa.
The Child Review Committee is made up of different stakeholders from different government departments, namely the South African Police Service, Department of Health, pathologists, National Prosecuting Authority, Social Development and Childline. The committee meets on a monthly basis, and every reported child death is brought in by the investigating officer in the form of an inquest docket. The docket is scrutinized, and if the committee is not satisfied with the explanation of the child's death, the docket will be sent back for further investigation, and the inquest may later be changed to murder or culpable homicide.
For us, it's not just about sitting around a table and looking at, what the cause of death was, because that the pathologist would do. But we start engaging with, is there anything that caused this child's death that could be prevented? Is there a preventable factor here? And if so, can we take a lesson from that so that we don't have a similar child death? But most importantly, also we ask questions about the family and whether there are other children in the family that are potentially at risk, in order for those children not to also follow the same pathway.
We asked Professor Matthews if she had picked up any patterns in terms of how the child deaths occur.
So from the Western Cape, we definitely saw that in that particular region, the practices of your medical officers are very different. So you get more natural deaths coming into your mortuary than in KZN. Okay, so we're seeing different things. We're also learning different things. So when a child dies suddenly and unexpectedly, those deaths should be coming into a mortuary if the child doesn't have a medical history. So what we are finding is in KZN that your doctors are more willing to sign those kind of sudden unexpected deaths off as natural deaths and not have a pathologist look at it. In the Western Cape, we're seeing more natural deaths coming in. So we're able to look at those some of those natural deaths more closely and starting to see that actually children under the age of 1 are dying still from preventable natural causes like your pneumonias and your diarrheas. So it's telling us important things. However, what we're learning from KZN is really, really interesting, because what we are seeing here is that you're having larger numbers of motor vehicle accidents in that we're picking up here. Also, suicides is a particular worrying problem in this particular northern part of Durban, where we are seeing very young children committing suicide. Similarly, electrocution deaths. We have far larger numbers of electrocution deaths in KZN, in this particular area in Phoenix, than what we have in the Western Cape. So doing this kind of work is telling us and highlighting some of the differences in patterns of death, but also telling us that the interventions we should be putting in place to prevent those deaths.
After the break, we continue with the Child Death Review Project, and we speak to Colonel Hitler, who has been there from the beginning of the CDR committee. Colonel Hitler, who currently serves in the Pietermaritzburg pilot project, explained her role.
My role was to facilitate. I call for dockets, request the dockets from the investigators. I peruse and guide the investigation, and the findings in these investigations are then discussed at these meetings where I present in the CDR.
Coming from an FCS background, she explained how this gave her better insight into child cases.
In the FCS, I gained knowledge and experience investigating crimes against children. I had a good understanding of the Children's Act. I was able to identify neglect and abuse and when to refer and when to remove children. So I believe that did help. It did give me a better insight into these cases. Also, I formed relationships with other departments whilst in the FCS, government and non-government. So that did help a bit, yes.
Some of the patterns regarding the manner in which children are killed in the KZN area include
patterns that I observed was hot water burns. You find that in the informal areas, fires are built and water is boiled, and children are exposed to that. By touching that, they then sustain burnt injuries, later resulting in their deaths. Another pattern would be electrocution, where you have illegal connections, live wires, low line, loose wires, and knowing that children are curious by nature, they touch these and get electrocuted. Another pattern we noticed was suicide in the younger children. As you know, the children do suffer emotional stress, different forms, be it from school to relationships to abuse, and they don't always confide in parents or friends. So a lot of them do commit suicide. So caregivers and parents need to be aware of these different potential dangers, and also to take necessary protective measures to protect the children.
Colonel Hitler also noted electrocution, suicide, as well as burn injuries as some of the common patterns in the Percy, Plessis-Laur and Pietermaritzburg areas. According to Professor Matthews, these child death reviews serve as a public surveillance mechanism to identify risk factors and protective factors and barriers to provide protection within the family and the community in order to develop interventions based on evidence. Dr. Quarrie, a pathologist at Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, together with Dr. Brij Mohan, also forms part of this committee. They are responsible for conducting autopsies on deceased children for the purpose of CDR, and their findings form part of recommendations for any case presented. In some instances, they have gone to court to testify where foul play has been suspected.
The child death review was a pilot project that was introduced to the KwaZulu Natal Department of Health by Professor Shanaz Matthews in 2014, and I became involved in March of that year as a co-investigator in the matter, and we essentially were reviewing all child deaths that came through our mortuary during that year. So what we've discovered in the process of reviewing the data from the Child Death Review pilot project was that the two centres, Salt River Mortuary in Cape Town and Phoenix Mortuary here in Durban, had very different patterns of child deaths. And one of the things that was surprising to us here in Durban was that we've had quite a high number of child homicides in our area. And we've also found that there's a trend in that we've got quite a number of electrocution-related deaths, as well as suicides. And the surprising thing about the suicides is that they are occurring in children that are between the ages of 9 and 13, which is younger than we would have expected. It's important for the pathologist to be on scene. There are a number of determinations that the pathologist can make relating to the time of death, whether there is any injuries and how those relate to the cause of death, whether there is any evidence that can be collected from the scene, and the role of the pathologist at the scene is there to support the function of the police, and as well as to assist in guiding the evidence collection and the preservation of evidence which may be collected at a later stage. So yes, it is extremely important for the pathologist to be present on the scene.
During our interview, Dr. Quarrie said that child deaths are underreported in South Africa and that community should be made aware that a child dying is an unusual event and that it needs to be reported and investigated. After the break, we speak to Advocate Noko, who is based in KwaZulu Natal. We spoke to the NPA, which has dedicated senior prosecutors to these child review cases. They also attend meetings in Phoenix Mortuary and Fort Napier Hospital, where they discuss and review these cases with all the relevant stakeholders.
We have a duty in terms of the Constitution and the law as the adults to take care of these children. And if anyone is found to have been negligent, to have been intentionally causing the death of the child, they will be prosecuted for that. and they'll be held accountable for that. And even if they're not prosecuted, perhaps if it was just child neglect, where you cannot really have a criminal case to prosecute the parent, they may lose their children, because social welfare will now take the children away to put them in places of safety, because we have a duty to make sure that children are safe. The Constitution is there, Section 28, the whole of it talks about children, how much you must take care of children. We have a duty, a legal duty, a constitutional duty. So please take care of these precious little ones.
To assist in some of these cases, the committee also has a social worker from Childline who told us how being part of this committee has assisted them.
Iyanceda kakhulu ngoba eventually ukuthi I'm a social worker by profession and I work for Childline, which is a child protection organization, Childline. So iyanceda ekutheni if ever in a family, for example, because we deal with children that have died. So if ever a child has died in a family and there are other children left behind in that family, so the social workers will get together and try to find assistance for the other children that are left behind in that family. So that's where the assistance comes in terms of other children in the family. Mostly in most families, baba very traumatized, very traumatized to an extent yoguti. Sometimes, as I said, the offer a service of bereavement counseling. Sometimes they would say, no, they're not ready to attend any of those sessions, and we have to respect that and give them time and allowance to heal. So that's the extent of how traumatic it can get for those families.
Childline has provincial offices and a toll-free number where anyone who's in need of assistance can get in touch with them. Nolu Sindiso made a plea to all South Africans to report all cases of child abuse and neglect at 0800 55 555. According to Professor Matthews, 20% of child deaths are due to child abandonment, and fatal child abuse cases occur mainly under the age of 5. A case in point is that of a child who was rescued from being part of the statistics of this child death review project. Pindile Mbeshwa abandoned her newborn baby in a taxi in Durban. The taxi driver dropped off his passengers at the Pavilion taxi rank. He then parked his taxi and sat with the other drivers while he was waiting for his turn to load. Later on, he went to his taxi and suddenly heard what sounded like a crying baby. He looked in the taxi but saw nothing unusual. But the crying persisted, so he decided to look again under the backseat. This is when he spotted something wrapped in a blanket. A closer look revealed a baby wrapped in a blanket with a handwritten note as well as some medication.